Alright, let's go through the skill rollout for this character. So the skill we're using is Tectonic Slam. Most important support for this is Combustion. Not only does it cap your Ignite chance, which is super important with Razor of the Seventh Sun, but it simply offers the most damage out of any support if you plan on igniting enemies. Next in line are elemental damage attacks and melee physical damage, simply the highest damage supports that you can pair up here besides concentrated effect. And then finally, we have sort of a flex slot here. I go with added fire damage. I like the consistent damage output. However, Ruthless Blows is also pretty good here and does offer the defensive benefit of an increased base stun duration. You can choose multi-strike as well, but I don't think there's quite enough endurance charge generation with my build in order to sustain that. If you do, you probably need a Warlord's Mark on hit ring. And then finally, we have increased area of effect, which you can swap for concentrated effect when you are going against nasty bosses as well. Fire Pen is also a reasonable swap if you happen to be doing a map with tons of extra elemental resistance map mods like Endurance Charge on Hit or just extra LE resists or whatever. So next we have our totem setup, Ancestral War Chief and Ancestral Protector both. You can actually summon both at the same time if you do a regular Protector and a Veil War Chief, so that's what I do. I use multiple totem support, so I actually have 2 of each. It's just the highest damage output for this totem setup, and then LE damage with attacks, which is the next highest damage support here because I run Zoph's Blood and get a full fire conversion with these 2 guys. It is very worth it, in my opinion, to actually link these up. A lot of times people don't, but it does offer hundreds of thousands of extra damage per second. So next we have our movement ability, which is Leap Slam, which we pair with Fortify. I also link it to Endurance Charge on melee stun and stun. You can certainly do a more mobile setup with faster attacks and Culling Strike maybe even in there, but I like the extra layer of Endurance Charge generation for this build. Then we have our mana reservation skills. Herald of Ash, most important, tons of extra damage, and also the overkill is insane when you get a charged slam. Arctic Armor synergizes well with Focus, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you want to pop your Focus and be able to face tank for the duration of it, so standing still during that time is basically what you're going to be doing. Taking full advantage of this guy. Then we have Purity of Elements. This build is very starved for resistances because suffix are gobbled up by all the focus modifiers crafted on these 4 pieces of gear. As a result, I do this to help round out my resistances. I throw Enlighten in here just to open up my mana pool a bit. Then we have our War Cries, very important part of the build, Enduring Cry being the primary source of endurance charge generation for the build. Rallying Cry offers quite a bit of extra damage and mana regeneration, and then increased duration with all the extra War Cry passives that you get on the tree and through your Ascendancy. Your Rallying Cry lasts about 30 seconds, and your Enduring Cry lasts something like 2.5 seconds, so you should have permanent uptime on both if you manage them properly. Then we have Cast When Damage Taken, again with a little bit of redundancy on our Endurance Charge generation through Warlord's Mark. You can use other curses here. I have Temp Chains and Enfeeble are both excellent, but Warlord's Mark is what I use just again for a little bit more reliability in terms of our Endurance Charge uptime. Finally, I throw in Molten Shell. I have tried Immortal Call here and I did not like it. The demand on endurance charges becomes just a little too high between that and your main skill. So I chose Molten Shell. We do have some increased armor on our passive tree, so it's actually a pretty relevant defensive bonus. And then finally, we have Focus, which kind of has support gems in the form of the suffixes crafted on these 4 pieces of gear. This massive boost to attack and cast speed, shocking nearby enemies, increased effect of Fortify, and immunity to ailments. So these 2 make it so you can just face tank. You don't have to worry about getting shocked or bleeding or poisoned or anything like that. Meanwhile, this increased effect of Fortify makes you incredibly tanky during your focus window so that you can wail on them while they are shocked and with this massive attack speed boost, which is actually a higher boost than Veil Haste offers. So, it's pretty crazy. Basically, any boss in the game you can mark down in that 4-second window, except perhaps things like Guardians and Shaper. But it's not even too far off in that case if you stack all your buffs properly.